Thank you so much for registering. And I know that this is a strange title, but it is for a reason. Because a lot of people know what growth mindset is. ICQ, maybe not so much. How the two are connected, that's a kind of mystery. So let's find out what it is exactly. So if you use the chat, what does growth mindset mean to you? Why do you think it's useful? You can just pop it in the chat. What does it mean to you? Why do you think it's important? Growth mindset. It's quite a trendy name. Lots of people know that. But what does it mean exactly? Holistic approach. Stay open-minded as time change. Yeah, good time to practice. Definitely. Keeps me flowing towards new ways of being. Very spiritual, very good. A mindset willing to learn, yeah. I think all of them are correct, and it's also not a competition because, you know, often we use words, but we never stop for a second to think about what they mean exactly, and often we just assume the other people have exactly the same definition. And usually that's not true at all. So looking at opportunities to learn, grow, Carol Dweck, yeah, that's exactly about this. So when we talk about fixed mindset and growth mindset, then yes, you're right. Most people have fixed mindset. They think that whatever they have now is limited. This is who they are. If they make a mistake, then case closed. Growth mindset is different. It stands for a lot of different things, but this is one of the most popular approaches, that I can learn from my mistakes, that I can improve by working hard. I will never give up. I'm determined to do my best. Self-reflection can help me, and I can overcome challenges with effort. So just try harder. You train your brain, you get smarter. So that's all important. Yes, that's very true. But then how come this is connected to cultural intelligence, ICQ? Any ideas? What did you think about the title before you registered? Did you have any ideas what this topic is about exactly? So when we talk about culture and cultural intelligence, this is what most people think about. Countries, nationalities, the 5 do's and don'ts in different countries. Or maybe sometimes now we talk about generations. Or we talk about gender. And all of them are important. So if you look at the research, more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. And we all belong to 15 or 20 cultural groups at the same time. But the problem is that if you look at the research where they compared 17 different cultural groups in terms of practicality and range of differences, then the bottom 3 were nationality, the country of origin, gender, and generation, which is really weird because, you know, these are the ones that most companies focus on when they want to increase diversity. And yes, in terms of equality and equal rights and things like that, it's very important. But if you look at performance, then it's not a black and white topic anymore. So when you talk to someone, even within your own family, what are the chances that the other person belongs to the same 15 or 20 cultural groups like you? It's next to 0. Every single conversation is a cross-cultural dialogue, but most people don't know about it. And that's why they are not looking for the solution that could unlock their potential. But if you go deeper, then we realize that there are different personality types within a smaller cultural group as well. You know, culture is not who we are, it's what we are used to, and that's very different. So even if you look at a country, at least 70% of the people are significantly different to what is normal around them, and at least 20% of them are the exact opposite. So if you look at the visible layer of diversity, it is insanely complex. It's really complicated. How can you master 150 countries and generations, genders, even if those numbers and models were correct? It's overwhelming. But if you look at the only layer of diversity that has proven benefit, which is cognitive diversity, then you realize that beneath the surface, there are a limited number of values and psychological needs. The behaviors that we use, the best practices we use to meet those needs and reflect those values, that's insanely complex. But there are a limited number of levers beneath the surface. It's a really important topic. And it's not just a theory. Jacob Morgan published a book last year. I think it was last year. And he asked one question from 140 top CEOs. What we should be teaching now leaders to prepare for the future? It's a really practical question. He came up with 4 mindsets and 5 skills. One of those skills was technology. The mindsets: growth mindset, teamwork, inclusion, global mindset. In terms of skills, self-awareness, innovation, communication, and coaching. As you can see, 8 out of 9 skills and mindsets are directly related to how much we understand ourselves and others. It's not technology, it's not policies, it's all about people, how much we understand ourselves and others. And we can say that, we should rely on common sense and good intention. That would be enough to bring out the best in ourselves and others. That's not exactly true, because common sense and good intention can majestically backfire. It's a really good name, but it's misleading. If you look at the definition of common sense from Einstein, that common sense is actually nothing more than a deposit of prejudices laid down in the mind prior to the age of 18. So this is technically just a bunch of assumptions that we accepted as truth. That's common sense. Common sense is based on the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated, but that would imply that everybody is like us. That's not true at all. So imagine that you have a tiny piece of map of London and you try to find something in New York. That's going to be really difficult. Even if you try harder, you think positive, you get lost more quickly. And this is what we do as well. We use a tiny piece of our own mental map. We assume it's 100%. And we also assume that other people have the same. And that's not true at all. So if you look at a different research, 60 to 80% of all problems in a company stem from strained relationship between employees. It's not because they are not good enough, it's because they clash. And the top 3 reasons: clashes of personalities, poor leadership, and clashing values. All 3 of them stem from the same source: the lack of understanding of why people think and behave differently. This is one of my favorite videos, and it explains everything. Okay, not everything, but it's a good one. Just a few seconds. So this is a really cute video, and it explains why we clash, why the mindset gap exists. Because imagine that you're standing in front of this, I'm standing next to it, and we disagree. You say it's a giraffe, I say it's an elephant. So if there is no trust and there is no psychological safety between you and me, we are going to put all that energy into convincing the other person that we are right and the other one is not. Just because we compromise and we meet in the middle, somewhere in the corner, we can't really see anything. Sometimes we have to go to the other side to see the world from a completely different perspective, and then it's going to make sense. Because otherwise, we have a serious mindset gap. And that's not just annoying, it costs us opportunities and money as well. So if you look at this, for example, 86% of leaders see themselves as inspiring. According to the McKinsey research, 82% of employees think they are not. You see, good intention, common sense backfires. 80% of CEOs consider the customer service outstanding. Only 8% of customers agree with them, according to Salesforce, and they know what they are doing. The problem is that most people don't say anything. They go somewhere else where they feel understood and valued. There's no feedback, you think everything is fine. You use your common sense, you had a good intention, it's gonna work. That's not true at all. 75% of employees leave managers, not companies, according to the Gallup research. And 89% of new hires fail within 18 months because they cannot fit in. That's not ideal. Just because somebody has a lot of qualifications, they speak the same language, it doesn't mean that you can understand each other. That's not true at all. And I made the same mistake. So if you look at this good-looking guy in the uniform, that's me. I grew up in a Hungarian village, and as soon as I finished university, where I studied Italian linguistics, I came to the UK, and just like most of those Eastern Europeans, I started doing any kind of jobs I could find. And after 3 years, I went to university again, and I studied international management. And my dissertation was about the implications in Eastern and Western European joint ventures. So it was really interesting. It was really useful. I compared the Hungarian and the Western European managers, and it turned out that the gap between the two generations in Hungary was much bigger than the gap between the new generation and the Western Europeans. That already contradicted everything that we learned about. That culture is country-specific and stable. So no, look at the numbers. That's not true at all. But who are you to question the academics who've been around for 40, 50 years? It's not polite. So I started my own company, which was a restaurant booking site. We started with 35 restaurants here in Brighton, and in 1 year we had 5,500 all over the UK. Became a joint venture, and on paper everything made sense. On a personal level, I couldn't work with the other CEO, just couldn't. So we had to get out of the business. We sold the shares, and this is when I started my research. I didn't understand how come that was the exact topic of my dissertation. I had years of experience. That department is #1 in the world in its category, and I couldn't put that theory into practice. So I got certified in a lot of different things, and I wanted to find out what went wrong, why, and how we could fix it, because that didn't make sense at all. So the result of that is a framework called Global Disc, and this program is based on it, the science of uncommon sense, because cultural differences are just clashes of common senses. And if that's how you approach this topic, then you can remove the illusion of separation, the illusion of superiority, and you can create synergy instead of painful liability. So the main concept is that the ICQ growth mindset is the ability to see a situation from different perspectives so we can make a better decision, and then we can choose to respond instead of just reacting. So it's all about cognitive and behavioral flexibility. When we talk about ICQ, when we talk about cultural intelligence, it's not about countries. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of that. That's the last century approach. It's important if you move to a country, learn about what people are used to. But if your success depends on how well you understand an individual, they can be really misleading. So if you look at the mindset, it's a really fancy topic, especially now. But technically, it's our best practices, values, and beliefs to get along and get ahead. It's not much more than that. It's a bunch of habits. So I read a book by Michael O'Neill, and he's the one who wrote The Super Coach. And he had a really interesting metaphor that made me think that according to him, everybody was born as a diamond, pure, full of potential. But as we interact with people and we pick up bad habits and we pick up bad experiences, then layer by layer, we build up some, this is his example, we build some shit around us. You know, it's always a little bit more, so it's difficult to notice it. But because we feel bad about it, we put some nail polish on it because we want to feel pretty. So that was his metaphor. And that made me think that if you think about the original concept of growth mindset, that we try harder, then we learn new techniques, then it's pretty much like putting more nail polish on it, which is good, but probably not the solution. So if you think about the German language, in Germany, the highest level of praise is when you don't get criticism. So what if the highest level of growth is when you can remove this middle layer, so you can achieve much more with the same amount of energy? You can run quicker because your baggage is smaller. But how do you do that? What are the ingredients of this middle layer? But there are two main reasons why most of the opportunities, time and energy are lost. One is friction with people who think and behave differently. And now you can see that you don't have to go abroad to experience this. Not at all. It's happening all around us. And the other reason is friction between what we want and what we actually do. And that's self-sabotage. These are the two main reasons. And of course, I wouldn't promise you anything that I cannot keep. So I'm not saying that we can remove this layer, but what if we can make it smaller and we can still add the nail polish to it? So the ICQ Growth Mindset course is exactly about this. We go into the details, we dig deep on an individual and group level. That's how we can unlock that potential. On an individual level, first, it's about capacity. There's no point in pouring more water in a pint glass if it's a pint glass. It doesn't matter how much you pour into it. We have to work on the comfort zone. This is the second part of the definition, that you can choose to respond instead of just reacting. What's the point in knowing about things if we always do what we do? Then we get the same results. Then we talk about our blind spots. And this is exactly what common sense is about. The world makes sense from our own perspective, but it's really limited. So if we can see the same situation from different perspectives, then it's going to be easier. We can make better decisions. But it doesn't feel good. That's not natural. This is something that we need to learn. And the other thing is self-sabotage, and I'm going to show you a bit more. So that's the reason why it's important to use assessments. So if you look at this sliding scale, and you imagine this sliding scale as the range between the sculpture, you know when you see the giraffe and then you see the elephant? So that's the sliding scale. If you're very much on the left-hand side, you see the giraffe. If you're very much on the right, then you can see the elephant. So you take an assessment, you learn about your own preference. And then statistically, most people have 5 to 10% flexibility. That's our comfort zone. And that's completely normal. Our brain is 2% of our body weight, but it uses more than 20% of the energy. So it's designed to keep us safe, not happy. So what if you're in a situation that would require this communication style? Then your stress zone is going to be really big. So maybe it takes up too much energy, or you cannot do it because you just react instead of responding, so you don't get the best possible result. Can we change it? Of course we can, but we don't have to. What we want is to expand your comfort zone. That is the goal. It's you, but an upgraded version, because we all have much more potential, but we limit ourselves because we don't know how our mindset works. How can you fix something if you don't know how it works? Most people use their mindset like they use their smartphone. They can use the apps, some of them, but most of them don't know that it's a supercomputer. And if something happens, definitely they cannot fix it. And that's the problem with that, because they don't teach it in schools. But if you look at, for example, the different personality types, probably most of you did some kind of psychometric assessment, DISC, MBTI, Hogan, any of those, which are really important because the different personality types exist because they have very different values and psychological needs. Therefore, their behavior reflects those values and supports those needs, unless they have to conform to certain norms. But how about the different types? Why are we sabotaging ourselves? Well, there's a theory around this, and that was from Shirzad Chamine. I did this course in January, and he backed up his research that according to him, there's a judge in all of us. It judges us, it judges others, and it judges situations. And usually, the judge has 2, 3, or 4 saboteurs. These are the kind of behavioral patterns that we developed as children to keep us safe, to get the approval of the people that we needed the most. So at that time, they served us. But are they serving us now? How do you feel safe? How did you get the attention that you needed? Did you play the victim? Or did you have to pretend to be perfect? Did you try to avoid all the problems? Did you try to please people too much? There are a lot of different ways of doing it. And that time they served us. But maybe now they don't. But can we tell the difference between the voices in our head? Not so much. On a group level, we go into deep again. Diversity and inclusion, it sounds like a really fancy topic again. And a lot of companies have the best intention. They have budget, they invest in it, but it doesn't mean that they can get it right. Diversity is not exactly the same as inclusion. I'm going to show you why. And then we talk about interaction gap, that 90% of business is interaction between people who think and behave differently. And team blind spot. So if you look at these devices here, then probably you had most of them in the 90s. And the new versions would be really different because there's a kind of evolution. But today, all of them can be replaced with a smartphone because they managed to seamlessly integrate all those functions into one portable, user-friendly device. Just because you squash and press these devices together, they are not going to turn into a smartphone. But this is what we try to do in terms of corporate training. You employ the best of the best, you teach them how to be normal, we call it onboarding, and you expect them to work like a smartphone. And that's exactly what they tried to do at BBC as well when I did workshops for them. They had 17,000 employees and they were celebrating and tolerating diversity, which is true, much better than hating people. But you cannot turbocharge your car by celebrating your engine. You have to understand how the different parts work together so you can optimize them and you can create synergy. And that's not based on common sense. But it makes much more sense if you can put some numbers to it, because otherwise it sounds like a fluffy topic and we like practical things. So this was a research done by the Three Circle partners in the US. They are the ones who created the Belbin model. They gave an individual assessment to each member of the team. They scored them individually, and then the team had to submit one collectively. What you see here, the blue number, that's the team result. The green one is the best possible individual score. That was a massive gap. So they repeated it many, many times. And the average gap was 79%. That's how much potential is lost in a team because of interaction gap. So again, you're not telling the teams that they are not good enough. You tell them the exact opposite, that they are awesome. And they have so much more potential, but they are losing it because they don't understand the blueprint of why people think and behave differently. We didn't learn that. So when you attend the course, for example, it can be any psychometric assessment or behavioral model, but this is the most popular and widely used behavioral model for a reason, because it's easy to remember, it's interesting. The different types exist because they have very, very different values and beliefs and needs, which gives them very different behavioral styles and very different perspectives. And, we like and trust people who are like us. That's normal. That's called homophilic diversity. That is easy. But when you have to work with people who think and behave differently, that is painful. It creates a lot of stress. And often you cannot even see it. Because you can put all these people in one team, and on the surface, they would behave very similarly. But deep inside, they are not like that. Just because we learn how to conform to the norms, it doesn't mean that we are the same. Not at all. And you saw the previous slide. That's the result of that. 79% of potential is lost in a team. So the question is that in your team, is that 90% or 50? That's the real question. But we all have this inside as well, in our head. We are all a combination of the 4 personality types. 1 or 2 of them are much stronger than the other ones, but they have opposing preferences, opposing needs and values. And they cannot exist at the same time, but they can switch really quickly. And that's why we feel stressed so many times, because we have a plan in the morning and we fail in the evening, because we want to hurry up, but we want to play it safe. Because we get used to the voices so much that we don't know what's happening and we think that we are the voices. No, we are the ones who observe them. And once we learn how to manage these voices in our head, the different types, then we can learn how to manage people, the different types on the outside. If we learn how to lead ourselves first, then we can manage other people as well. But most of us don't know how to do that. It is something that we need to learn. And this might be a bit controversial, but it is for a reason. When we talk about inclusion, then often we think about painting everything rainbow colored and people hugging, and that's fantastic. But there's much more to it. Diversity is when you're invited to a party, and inclusion is when you're asked to dance. This is the typical metaphor that you use. But there is a step before that, and that is self-inclusion. Low self-esteem, and this is why most people are struggling, because they don't like themselves too much. They don't understand themselves too much. Imagine if you know exactly who you are, what you stand for, and you even like yourself. then you don't have to bully anyone to feel important. You don't have to hide to feel safe. That's why this is step one. Self-inclusion is not selfish. That's the foundation. How can you be inclusive towards others if you cannot accept yourself? Unless somebody has the martyr syndrome, and then their self-esteem depends on how many people need them or how many people like them. But that's a really fragile place. It's really, really stressful. So that's why you have to focus on the mindset. And that's part of the training as well. So ICQ growth mindset is about unlocking potential with the blueprint of why people think and behave differently, so they can get along with themselves and others. And again, we cannot miss this part, because this is where most people are struggling, but maybe they don't want to admit it. It's much easier to criticize others than it is to take responsibility for our own growth. We demand other people to have common sense, meaning I want you to draw the same conclusion than me, even though you have a completely different background, different experience, and different perspective. That's what I'm demanding. And that doesn't make sense. That's why the golden rule backfires. So if you look at Simon Sinek, he's one of the very few geeks who managed to become famous for the right reasons. Because he didn't create anything new, but he managed to uncomplicate a complex topic. And he's the one who introduced the golden circle: what, how, and why you do what you do. And we use the same concept. Because if you think about changing somebody or yourself, it's scary. Talking about transformation, very scary. But leveling up, upgrading, it's me but a better version, that's much more positive. And there are different stages. Because if somebody has some difficulties with a situation, they just need the right techniques. You just need to know what to do. But if, for example, you have a bigger problem, for example, with a topic, you need the strategy to know how to do it. But if you want real transformation, but without too much pain, then you need some kind of insight. You have to understand why. Changing perspectives is not easy at all. It's not natural. It's not normal. This is something we need to learn. The problem is that our why are our values, and the values are usually binary. Something is good or bad. So when you meet someone whose behavior is driven by opposing values, it's going to trigger us. It's going to trigger a really intense emotional response, and we know it was so obviously wrong, we can't explain why. Because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. Then it's difficult to talk about it. We can talk about the symptoms, but not the root cause of the problem. So the ICQ Growth Mindset course is about the 3 layers. Because a change in perspective is worth 80 IQ points. I mean, it's an interesting definition that the inability to change perspective is equivalent to a loss of intelligence. That's why we focus on cognitive and behavioral flexibility. And this is what we mean by ICQ. ICQ is not about nationalities. That's a tiny fraction of that. That's not intercultural training. That's international training. There's a big difference there. So it's not just a good idea. It's endorsed by the leading experts in the world. And these guys are practitioners. They work with the best of the best to make them even better. So the program won a lot of awards. It's ICF accredited. And also it's in a book which became Amazon bestseller. Uncommon Sense in Unusual Times. And that's the point, that we cannot demand common sense. But the uncommon mindset is the competitive advantage. So it's been used by Fortune 500 companies, universities, national governments, other global companies as well. And now we have licenses in over 31 countries. So this is a kind of topic that we all need. The problem is when you mention concepts like global mindset, cultural intelligence, then the people who need it the most dismiss it. Because, yeah, I'm not an international businessman, I'm not a tycoon, I don't need that topic. Well, yeah, you do. When we talk about ICQ, the blueprint of why people think and behave differently, yes, you do. If you want to understand yourself better and the people around you, if that's your family, your colleagues, your boss, your clients, doesn't matter. We need them. This is something we need to learn. And the goal is to make this process as uncomplicated and practical as possible. So the upcoming course, the ICQ Growth Mindset course, is exactly about this. This is the fourth one now. 4 times 90 minutes. It's live, it's interactive, 50 people maximum. It includes the techniques, the strategies, and the insights as well. Different assessments, the book, and also a community. Because it doesn't matter how good a training is or how good a book is, it's not going to change our life. But if you join a community where you can discuss things, where you can share your concerns and questions and your ideas, you mix with people who are on the same journey, that's a very different level. And that's exactly what we need. So that's why I wanted to present it, that what we mean by ICQ growth mindset. It's not just a slightly different version of the growth mindset concept, not at all. And we just slap ICQ in front of it. No, this is a very different take on it, and for a reason, because we go to the root cause of the problem before it becomes an issue.